In a 10-year period, your career has taken you from talent acquisition specialist to now CHRO. What
Yes.
has that trajectory taught you about leadership?
So I think that it's taught me about sort of the difference between positional leadership and sort of just, you know, influential power leadership, So, I talk about sort of being an influencer, not like a social media one or anything like that. But, I'm very fortunate that when started my first HR role, I had a whole career previously. I had worked a series of jobs where I had a lot of leadership and management experience. So I already sort of came in when I went for the talent acquisition specialist role. I already had this. I had this skill set. And I also had this master's degree in organizational leadership, which was really, really helpful because it helped me to sort of hone my craft. I was able to approach every situation with a lens of a leader, but also sometimes being the role of the follower. Because positionally, I was the follower. I was not leading anything in the talent acquisition specialist role, except I was leading my body of work. And I worked with a really fantastic HR director, Amy Cortesi, who I'll always shout out. And she basically said, you can do this work. And, so I'm just she provided me some guidance, but I was really able to sort of develop my own body of work and manage it appropriately. But there were times when I had to be a follower. And that was something that I already was aware of, but I really had to sort of maneuver this because I was working at the largest organization I'd ever worked for. There were a lot of different personalities and there were a lot of, sort of politics somewhat at play. And, so I just had to sort of figure it out. So as I reflect on 10 years now in HR, going as, talent acquisition specialist to now being CHRO, the thing about leadership is that you always want to be a listener. You try not to make judgments, or if you do make judgments, be prepared to change that judgment. And really, the idea of being empathetic and kind. And I just think that doing all of that, whether or not you are in a positional place of power, or if you are aspiring to be, or you're just sort of an influencer. I think having those skills and utilizing those skills is really what makes a powerful leader.
So leadership being a skill and not necessarily a job title
Mhm.
is really the most important thing. But there are a lot of people in the community in various jobs that have found themselves as a manager and automatically think that they're a leader, but they do miss those soft skills. I guess my question would be, how would that person do the legwork while they're in the position, and avoid that sense of imposter syndrome, I guess?
Something I think is really important for anyone who is a leader and certainly finding themselves in a position of being a manager, supervisor, something where you have, this positional power or this positional responsibility. I think it is really important to practice self reflection because you want to reflect on sort of how interactions went, how people are responding to you. And again, that sort of goes back to the listening because you have to be paying attention and you want to be prepared to sort of make some changes and make some pivots. But as doing self reflection can be challenging for people because people really have to give an honest assessment of sort of how they think things are going. And I also encourage talking to your team, talking to whomever it is that you're leading, checking in with them. Then you know that however it is that you are being a leader or whatever the skills you're bringing to the interactions, to your management role, your supervision role, it's working, it's being effective. But really, that self-reflection piece is huge. And I
Mhm.
practice that daily. It is a really, really an important skill and it helps me to be able to show up the next day in a positive place, but determined to make tomorrow better than today.
I'm curious if, with having all of that reflection, was there a specific moment in your career that maybe you thought to yourself or somebody told you, hey, you're meant to move into this level, you're meant to elevate? What would that be?
So it's interesting. I would say that, here at my organization, Say Yes Buffalo, we have an incredible visionary leader named David Rust. We call him Dave. He gave me like this HR agenda. So I thought we were going to go through that. And he basically laid out a career path for me. He
Mhm.
said, "You're going to be our first full time HR director. This would go into effect like 2 years from when we were speaking." Because he said, "I have the budget laid out. This is sort of my plan." Da, 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 da. Now, internally, I was thinking, no, okay. That's thank you, but mm-mm. Because I didn't think I wanted to be an HR director. I wanted to lead on talent acquisition. So when I talked
Mhm.
about me being a talent acquisition specialist, I loved it. I loved it. I was like, "Oh, yes." And I was going to convince my former organization that they need to hire me as a director of talent acquisition and talent development because that was something that was I felt there was opportunities at the other organization. I love talent acquisition, but the whole day to day of HR work when I was at the other organization, I watched the HR directors and then later the CHRO, dealing with a lot of stuff. And I thought to myself, not interested. But I was always open to, opportunities. And I think about the saying, don't block the blessings, because I kept thinking to myself, there's a reason why, he said this to me. He's a very smart man. So clearly, he's seeing something, even though I literally have done not a stitch of on-site HR at this moment in time. But okay, I was already doing self-reflection. These were things that I had sort of, I want to say that I started doing that during the Master's of Organizational Leadership program. I'm almost positive that's where I picked that up, really sort of doing that. I found it to be really effective with me because I was working with this team that had not had on-site HR. So there was a lot of opportunity for them to sort of come to me and share a lot of things. And so I
Mhm.
had to think about sort of how I would be responding, making sure that, interactions went well, providing them with solutions, figuring out certain things where I did a practice where I would just say, I would allow one time to sort of vent. And then the next time we would have to do a problem solving thing. It couldn't just be a vent session because I kept telling people I'm not a mental health counselor. So I realized, I said, wow, I said, I think I could do this. And I think I want to do this. And I said, wait, I am doing this. I did foresee myself doing some sort of leadership in HR, but it just wasn't quite what I was thinking. But it was absolutely what I was meant to do.
You're building leaders in our community right now through different cohorts in your organizations. You were part of the BNHRA. You were the president most recently. How does that translate to your wanting to be a mentor to others today?
I mean, so my thing about human resources is that I think that every organization, every business ever should have human resources. I think it should be just embedded in that culture as much as anything else. It is so important. And really what I'm trying to do is show the value of human resources. And I want to be able to mentor individuals in the community that have sort of that natural HR brain or that talent, in terms of working with people and being able to provide them with supports and things that they need in order to be successful in the workplace. And specifically, with us living in the Buffalo Niagara region and the Buffalo Niagara region being the sixth most segregated region in the United States, it is important that individuals of color are represented in human resources. And so if we look at the demographics of the individuals working in human resources, specifically here in Buffalo, Niagara, I would say that we are underrepresented. We being people of color are underrepresented in human resource spaces.
Mm.
Unclear if I was the first Black president of the NHRA. All signs are pointing to it. But again, I'm showing up in spaces that traditionally we haven't been in. And I want to be able to open the doors for those who are coming behind me, those who are younger than me, those who are very, very talented, people who have been unsung. I want them to be able to have the opportunity that I was afforded. And so I think it is my duty to ensure that others who have, that talent, that interest, that they are able to find their opportunities as well. But many of the quote unquote future leaders already are doing leadership work. They just need, maybe a little massaging here and there.
Mhm.
They need, and specifically leaders of color, really being able to give them tools in their toolbox because it doesn't look the same for all of us, and it goes across the board no matter what, race, creed, what have you. But for those of us of color, there are certain things that we can clock and that we
Mhm.
actually expect. And so one of the things that I talk about with leadership development, and specifically in an organization like Say Yes, where we are 70% people of color and women, um, it's gonna look different. And so I have those conversations where say, when I'm in a room of emerging leaders and, we have a mix of individuals, I'll say at one point, so for my siblings of color, I'm about to get deep on something. And I said, for our white allies and accomplices, you're gonna learn something. And we talk about sort of how this can potentially look. And so just doing that because it is so important. We have such a talented community here in the Buffalo Niagara region. And I want to be able to provide as much opportunity to people as possible, specifically in the HR field is sort of what I can kind of influence or control, but other things too. Really, whatever it is that you want to do in your career, I want to make sure that you have the tools to ensure that you can do this. You can do whatever it is that you're trying to do. And even if it's opening a door for someone or giving people some ideas in terms of how to maneuver around a specific system, and then maybe even ideas of how to sort of work around additional systems once you're in that particular system, I will do it. I want to make sure that I'm able to provide that. I really do feel like it's a calling for me. And really as my dad would say, it's just the right thing to do. So
I could absolutely attest to that because you were one of the first people that I met when I moved to this area. And it is so important to connect with someone who sees you and who hears you. And there's no gatekeeping when it comes to
yeah.
connecting with you, right? It's like
Mhm.
there's enough for all of us to share. But I feel like a lot of people who are coming into the workforce, especially those early to mid career professionals, don't have somebody in their corner. They don't have anyone who hears them. And a lot of folks feel like they're not seen. What do you want them to know?
I encourage them to find their tribe in some way, shape, or form. So it can start with sort of personal connection. Maybe it's your friends, or maybe it's, people in your family. Because sometimes people don't have those connections there. I would always try to help anybody. But I
Mhm.
think for those who don't feel comfortable sort of talking to some random man that they're seeing on a podcast, a lot of times those people exist in their sort of circle, but they may not be talking or asking the right things in order for them to emerge as that person.
If somebody who's listening needs a clear distinction between job and career, what would that be?
A job can be part of a career. I've worked in education administration. So my first job was working admin at a charter school here in Buffalo. And I was there for 4 years, but I didn't really have a career path and
Mhm.
that was a job. And then my next role was me doing fundraising and development work for a local cultural institution. That had nothing to do with my previous work, but I went and I did this job. I had enough of skills that I could sort of make this work. They kind of took a chance on me because I had not done fundraising and development work, but I wasn't doing anything major. I could say there's certain things that they had in common, but that wasn't part of a career path. Whereas with a career, I think about with HR. I came into HR and I remember I said to myself, I really want to build a career here because the talent acquisition piece felt right. I had a
Mhm.
wonderful person like Amy who was like my cheerleader, and I remember I thought to myself, "I'm gonna make sure that this lady is proud of what I'm doing," because I said, "She's taking a chance on me, and I'm doing this." And I remember sitting down with Amy and been talking about career, and I said, "What do I need to do? Because I need to build a network, so I can get people to be applying for these jobs." And then she was like, "Join BNHRA, Buffalo Niagara Human Resource Association." I said, "All right," and I did, joined it. And from there, just being on a committee, and then right place, right time, I made friends with the college relations director, and then she was elevated to president, and then she said, "Do you wanna be my successor as college relations director?" "Sure." So I did that. So again, I was thinking this is all part of my career path. I was really doing a career because I said, "I'm in this talent acquisition role. This is not where I wanna be forever, but I know I need to, pay my dues because of course, I mean, I was new in the whole field. But I said, this is what I'm gonna do because I can really build a career with this. And with my main goal being a director of talent acquisition. That was my main goal. And of course, switched around a little bit, but but that was still a career. That was a career path. I literally was there and I said, this is what I want to do and I want to progress in this pathway. And so any role I take has to be related to human resources. And that to me is sort of how I distinguish between a career versus my previous jobs that were just a
Mm.
sequence of jobs with no real sort of link.
Can we talk about talent acquisition for a second?
Yes.
Because that's how I started in
Mhm.
HR as well. I had an interesting conversation with someone today. It was a candidate that I actually was making an offer to. And he stopped me in the middle of our conversation and expressed exhaustion.
Mm.
And I sit on LinkedIn, I look through tons of posts. We see it happening all the time. What is it about the recruitment process and the job seeking process today that is creating this exhaustion as compared to 5 years ago?
And as a society, I feel like we're exhausted. I'm not gonna get deep into the politics piece, but, people can read between the lines if they're,
Hmm.
hear sort of what I'm saying. But that being said, even, that piece of it, it has just been it's challenging. So I feel like right then and there, we're already tired. But I also think that where it had been a job seekers market 5 years ago, coming out of the pandemic, so 2021 was 5 years ago, coming out of sort of the active days of the pandemic and lockdown. People could just leave jobs. They were leaving jobs left, right, and sideways. They were like, I can get paid more over there. It was a job seekers market, and it stayed that way for a couple of years, but it started to slow down. And I think, and now, especially given sort of what has happened in the past year, things have really, really slowed down. And so you have people who are when they're applying for jobs and technology's made it easy for us to be able to apply to like hundreds of jobs at once. And so if you are applying to hundreds of jobs and depending on sort of how closely you're paying attention to what it is that you're applying to, that can be an exhausting process. I interviewed with them here. All right, I'm supposed to do this. Oh, this is the second interview here. Oh, this one is a third interview. Oh, this is the first. I mean, trying to keep track of all that and saying all that, that's exhausting. So my assumption is with this person is that you're not the first organization that they interviewed with or first company. And they probably interviewed with a couple of others or at least had been applying to a couple. And then they're finally in this space where they've made it and you're making them the offer and they're probably like, finally, I'm here, but God, am I tired? I would imagine is probably part of what was coming into play with that person.
I also think that there's another side of that coin where, on one side, the people are exhausted, and on the other side, people are angry. They're
Mm,
angry at HR, they're
mm,
angry at talent acquisition, they're
mm,
angry with AI, they're angry
mhm,
at all of it.
mm, mhm.
Is there a path back from there?
I guess I would say that I believe that there is a path back, but one of the things that I think our industry meaning HR, you have to take some really hard, long looks at themselves. There are some practices that are currently in place that people are going to have to make the decision to change. And I don't know how close anybody is to doing that. I also think that there are some people in this field that probably should have never been in this field, but need to leave now. And there's multiple reasons why. It could be that their practices are outdated. It could be that their practices are not equitable. It could be that their practices are harmful. It could be their mindset is harmful. It could
Mm,
be there's lots of bias in their mindsets. It could be the concept of the gatekeeping. And it could be even those individuals who work in, roles where, they call it employee relations, but all it is that they're running around firing people.
right.
They're the ones that fire, and then people get excited about it, which that blows my mind. So I think you have all of these practices in place. I think there needs to be a reflection of the current practices that we have in place. Also, I think we as HR really need to figure out a way to incorporate AI or any type of technology that is coming our way into our practices and to use them as tools, not replacements, but tools. And if you are a strong HR professional and you work for a company or organization that at least has some sort of interest in HR, even if they're sort of skeptical, but if you are someone who's really practicing really strong empathy, you're able to connect with your staff. You have people coming to you and not running from you. Then most likely you're not going to get replaced by AI because They're because they're gonna say, "Well, we can't, we can't lose, we can't lose Jay. I mean,
Mm,
he's our guy. Everybody loves him. So, all right, so yeah, AI, we could maybe use AI for some talent acquisition stuff here, but maybe let's talk to Jay and sort of figure out how we can use this to help him in his role
mm,
versus how to replace him." But if you have staff that does not like you, that does not like HR, that is, again, like I said, running when you're coming, the chances of you being replaced by AI or some other type of technology jumps up tremendously. But again, it adds to the fact that this is why people are mad at HR. When I first did the Leadership 101 program, which is one of the leadership development programs that I am created and I'm currently facilitating. So I think we maybe a second or third session. And I'm sitting in. So we always did this thing where we have an outside speaker come in, spoke about the whatever the subject matter was for about an hour, and then afterwards we would have facilitated conversation for 3 hours, right?
mm,
And that sounds like a lot, but I'm telling you, it flew by.
mhm,
But I remember the individual in the cohort said, "Collin, I just want to thank you for this because this isn't what HR does." And I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "HR doesn't help and support staff. They're not interested in our leadership development. HR is only here to, make sure that the paperwork is filed and if we get in trouble." And I said, "Has that been your experience with HR?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "I'm sorry that that's been your experience with HR." Because I said, "What I'm doing now, that's what HR is supposed to be doing. It's one of the things that we're supposed to be doing." I said, "Our job is to make your job easier so that
mm,
you are able to do what you need to do in order to be successful at your job. So if you're not successful at your job because of practices that we have in place, we're not doing our job." So, but the fact that that is what somebody said to me, and I've had multiple people that do this, and I do career check-ins with people as part of these leadership development programs. And when I tell you the first time that folks do a check-in with me, how nervous they are, and these are some people that actually know. They come in, they got their notebook, and they're like, and I'm like, "Why are you nervous? It's me. What are we doing?" And we literally have conversations about career and how,
mhm,
the sessions are going and things like that. But again, people are Shar has traumatized so many people. And that to me, it makes me so sad, so heartbroken, and so angry. And that's
yeah,
something that, because I can't stand an HR practitioner that is utilizing the role to cause harm. I'm
mm,
like, get out, 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 out.
absolutely. And I would say in the talent acquisition space, a huge discussion is ghosting
Mm,
in interviews, people doing their phone screens or coming on site to interview with the team and then not hearing anything ever
mhm,
again. I
mhm,
think if we're trying to move past task lists and start thinking towards impact, we need to take those extra steps to facilitate these things, to talk to the
mhm,
people, because there are people who I'll get on the phone with and they couldn't care less that I'm calling them to offer them a job. And there are people I'll get on the phone with and this is, a life-changing moment for them.
mhm,
Right. But either way, we need to be paving a simpler path for folks.
mhm,
Right. People who come in and, I work in manufacturing and people who are out on the production floor working from 5 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Their
mhm,
day needs to be easier because of the work that we do.
mhm.
So I really do appreciate that. For folks who are experiencing interview fatigue and it's led them to not be fully showing up in their interviews, what is a mindset shift that they need to make?
I think that what is really important is anytime someone is going to do an interview, that they do a mock interview with someone that they trust. And I think that doing that and making that a best practice will help to get you re engaged in that particular role because you have that person there, so they're asking the questions. And again, this could be on Zoom, it could be on Teams, it could be on the phone, whatever it is. But if you make that a best practice, I feel like that could help you. So you're never quite going in like, "Oh, here we go again," because you will already have been sort of like, jazzed up by the fact
Mhm.
that you have been interacting with this person. I would encourage anybody to do that.
I think a lot of people who are using ChatGPT as their mock interview buddy, that is the wrong way to go. You
Nope.
have to get that live feedback for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So, Colin, final thoughts. Speak directly to the person who has these ideas and has these ambitions, but they don't have any fire left. What's one thing that they could do this week to get themselves going again?
I'd say practice that self-reflection. Really think about where did my fire go and why did it leave me? And really honestly sort of reflect on it. Think about it. And then figure out, okay, I got to figure out a plan to ensure that I can get that fire back. Because not reflecting, I just don't know how you are able to really judge if you have that fire or not.
Colin, I can't say enough how much I appreciate your time. So I wanted to thank you again for being here.
It was my pleasure again, Jay. I'm so excited for you doing this because one of your things for sure. You have many things because you're a very talented man, but I'm here for you.
I appreciate it.